Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's turn to some political news. The polling suggests that many American voters are not satisfied with the 2024 presidential choice that they're being offered, a rematch between President Biden and Donald Trump. And for months, the group No Labels has been saying that it will get together a unity ticket, and it will run that unity ticket only if it thinks that there is a path to win. And on Thursday, they threw in the towel. Here is a piece of the statement. Americans remain more open to an independent presidential run and hungrier for unifying national leadership than ever before. But No Labels has always said we would only offer our ballot line to a ticket if we could identify candidates with a credible path to winning the White House. No such candidates emerged, so the responsible course of action for us is to stand down. Let's listen to a piece of No Labels National Director Joe Cunningham in an interview with Neil Cavuto on Fox News.
The shorter answer is that to field this ticket, No Labels was looking for a hero, and a hero never emerged. We've been very straightforward and upfront and honest with the American public that we were going to field this ticket if two conditions are met. Number one, if Americans wanted another option, which is definitely a box that is checked. And number two, if we're able to find candidates that we believe have a pathway to victory. And that's where we ran into a bit of trouble, is at the end of the day, we weren't able to find candidates that we felt had a straightforward path to victory in this.
Monet, what do you make of this and what it says about our political system and the political moment that we're in?
I think that it was clear to the organizers of No Labels, as it was clear to just about everyone paying attention to the presidential race, that there's massive dissatisfaction with the two options who are going to top the Democratic and Republican Party tickets. And so they believed it was the ripest possible opportunity to field a credible third-party candidacy. But I think what they probably overlooked, and what has become even clearer as time has gone on, is that Americans really still are baked into their respective political camps, perhaps more because of opposing the other party than supporting their own party or supporting the candidate of their own party. But there isn't really a huge persuadable middle out there. It might be larger than it's been in past election cycles, but it's still not gaping wide. And another thing that we've seen over the past few months is the emergence of Robert Kennedy Jr. as a viable candidate, not in the sense of really having a path toward winning the presidency, but in the sense of having gained ballot access in about 6 states so far and polling really highly. He has about 11% of popular support nationally, or at least in important swing states. And so he has already carved out a lot of that third-party support that theoretically could have gone to a No Labels candidate. And so I think that a lot of these people who they were speaking to about the possibility of running under their mantle thought that the only thing that I will do if I run is to be a spoiler, because it just isn't as much room for me to build a large base of support. Probably not enough room for me to actually win a single state. And the possibility of me just tipping the election in one way or another, and specifically, I think, tipping the election to Donald Trump, seemed to be a very high possibility for them, which they believed, I think, would give them the legacy of having threatened American democracy, quote unquote. That's exactly what the press would say. That's exactly what Democratic elites would say. And they were very shy about the possibility of having that effect on the presidential race.
What I would add to that is the Electoral College requires majority winners. That's in the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. Presidential and vice presidential candidates need a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. And what that means is even if you can get a third party stood up and you can do all of the work to get on a whole bunch of ballots. No Labels says it had qualified for 21 ballots, and maybe it could have gotten more by the time the presidential voting started, but that is a long way from 50. And even if you can win a bunch of states, if you can't win a majority of the Electoral College, then you send the presidential election to Congress. And there is not a congressional delegation from No Labels. In Congress, it's all Republicans. and it's all Democrats. This is the two-party system that we have. The rules are set up, and they channel voters into one of two major parties. That is how it has been throughout American history, and there are some advantages to that. We do not have the kind of fractured political coalitions that you see in some places with parliaments, where they have an election and then they spend a lot of time after that wrangling, trying to get together a governing coalition because there are several or a dozen parties in the parliament. That has its own drawbacks. But Monet, one thing that I would also add is that I don't think No Labels is wrong about the hunger among a broad chunk of the electorate for another option. This is the recent February Harvard-Harris poll. The question is, do you think if Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the nominees of their parties, that the country needs another alternative, or that this is a good choice for the voters? And 62% of people say that the country needs another choice. And I sometimes get emails from readers and listeners saying, well, how can that be true? How can that poll be right? If you look at the primary results and Donald Trump and Joe Biden are winning 80 or 90% of their respective parties. And the answer is that the share of voters that are participating in these party primaries is actually pretty low. And in some of the caucus states, it's something like 10%. So it can be true that Donald Trump is beloved by Republicans, and it can be true that Joe Biden is beloved by many Democrats, and you still have 40% of the voters who are independents who are not making their voices heard in those processes.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And something I'd add to that is that the incentives for the leading candidates of both parties often are to cater to their own respective bases in their own approach to policy and campaigning. I think that President Biden probably has seen the polls of late that have shown him losing to Donald Trump in just about all of the major swing states, 6 out of 7 in the recent Wall Street Journal poll. And that would suggest to his campaign advisors that they should be telling him, you need to reach out for the center. You need to reach out for some of those Republican voters who are clearly dissatisfied with Donald Trump, who should be winnable for him. And yet he has even stronger incentives to continue governing in a way that caters to the left within his own party. You've seen him, for example, within the past couple of months, ban exports of liquid natural gas. That's something that is going to be really dispiriting to a lot of voters in the middle of the country who are not necessarily deeply committed Republican voters, but who work in practical industries that depend on efficient energy. But you still see that on the one hand, the majoritarian structure of the American electoral system should be encouraging candidates to reach for the middle. But the way that our politics is organized makes that very difficult or very unrewarding for these candidates to do for one reason or another. And so you have this large group who should be winnable voters in the middle, but who end up, because the difference is so stark between a very progressive president on one hand and a very culturally conservative candidate in Donald Trump on the other hand, these voters end up retreating to one camp or the other in order to stop the opponent from being elected. And so there doesn't really seem to be very much ability for a third-party candidate to come and cater to that demand, despite the fact that it's very large in the middle of the country.
Thank you, Monet and Alicia. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.